It's Friday, the 23rd of April 2021. Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Headlines, the business news you need in just 5 minutes. I'm Sean Aylmer. In today's headlines, the US announces ambitious new climate change targets and others follow, leaving Australia looking very out of step. Plus, the federal government cracks down on arrivals from COVID-hit countries, particularly India. Business investment intentions hit their highest level in 27 years. And Popeyes, the US fast food giant, looks at entering the Aussie market. Our lead story today, President Joe Biden hosted a virtual climate summit overnight, committing to halve the amount of coal and petroleum produced by the US by 2030, compared to 2005 levels. That would achieve nearly double the goal set out in the landmark 2015 Paris Accord. Japan and Canada both announced their own new emissions reduction targets, while the European Parliament and Britain have done so in recent days. Chinese President Xi Jinping called for a multilateral approach with the United Nations at its centre, while Russia's Vladimir Putin outlined programs to cut methane emissions, support nuclear power, and ensure carbon capture and storage projects. In his speech to the summit, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said Australia will make bankable reductions in carbon dioxide emissions even without a concrete target. He said Australia would achieve net zero through technology that enables and transforms our industries, not taxes that eliminates jobs. The summit is President Biden's attempt to convince the world that the US is willing and able to cut emissions, and includes most leaders from the major emitters as well as business and religious leaders. Yep, it's a talk fest, but one that will reinvigorate efforts to reduce emissions. Australia is looking decidedly second rate when it comes to climate change. Okay, it's all political. Big parts of the federal government's constituency don't want targets. But this is what leadership is all about. Australia is one of the world's largest emitters on a per capita basis. The Prime Minister needs to do much, much more. In overseas news, Bank of Canada has become the first central bank of a major economy to signal a tightening of monetary policy as the country rebounds from its pandemic-related recession. Governor Tiff Macklem said the central bank would scale back its purchases of government debt and accelerate the timetable for a possible interest rate increase. The International Air Transport Association said carriers would lose about $48 billion this calendar year as a result of further COVID flare-ups. And the European Union told Australian Trade Minister Dan Tehan that it would not block a shipment of 1 million AstraZeneca vaccines to Papua New Guinea, though the flow to Australia would still be stuttering. Locally, Prime Minister Scott Morrison yesterday said the government will limit people travelling from high-risk COVID-19 countries entering Australia. Chartered flights from India will be reduced by 30%, and the volume of direct flights between India and Sydney will also fall. India yesterday reported 314,000 cases of COVID-19, the largest number in a single day reported by any country. Business conditions, hiring intentions, and capital expenditure are all well above their pre-COVID-19 levels, adding to the growing list of positive news on the local economy. The National Australia Bank Quarterly Business Survey, released yesterday, shows business investment plans at their highest level in 27 years. Business investment until now had been a missing piece of the economic jigsaw puzzle, but it seems that companies are confident enough in the economic recovery to start spending money. The Prime Minister and Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said Australia's relationship with China was important, but the decision to veto Victoria's Belt and Road Initiative with Beijing was in the national interest. On Wednesday, Canberra abolished 4 deals the Victorian state government had struck with overseas nations, 2 with China and 1 each with Syria and Iran. The Chinese embassy labelled the decision unreasonable and provocative and said it would damage bilateral relations. 2 of the louder voices in the local airline industry have clashed over domestic air travel. Earlier in the week, Regional Airlines Deputy Chair John Sharp said he thought Qantas might be technically insolvent. Qantas boss Alan Joyce hit back yesterday, saying Mr Sharp, a former federal transport minister, willfully misled the market. Mr Joyce said Rex had undertaken the worst launch of a new jet airline in Australian aviation history when taking on capital city routes. An American fast food chain, Popeyes, might be heading to Australia. Just what we need, another fast food burger chain. The Financial Review is reporting that US-based Restaurant Brands International, which sells about $32 billion worth of fast food every year across 100 countries, is looking for a local partner to bankroll the launch of Popeyes. Popeyes was founded in New Orleans in 1972 and primarily sells fried chicken and shrimp, or prawns as we like to call it. It wants to take on KFC, Oporto and Red Rooster. For those that don't know it, Popeyes is exactly what you're imagining it to be right now. That's the Fear and Greed business headlines for today. Make sure you hit follow so you get it every morning. And if you'd like more detail and more stories, search for our longer daily podcast called Fear and Greed. We also release a daily interview. Today we talk to Dr. Richard Hamilton from one of Australia's oldest winemaking families about how his 3 labels pivoted away from China to find new export markets. I'll be back later with the afternoon market report. I'm Sean Aylmer. Have a great day.